Okay, we are up to Daf Lamites. Oh, Daf Mem. I'm sorry. Right. We did Lamites yesterday, so we are up to Daf Mem Amud Aleph. Right at the top, we got right up to the top of the Amud yesterday. We are up to Itmar. So the first thing we learned about is if you buy tzir, that's what we finished off with yesterday. If you buy tzir, as long as it has this kilbois in it, these little seahorses, I don't know what they're, sea dogs, sometimes little fish. That's a siman that this tzir is kosher tzir because those fish wouldn't survive in non-kosher tzir. And the Gemara made a distinction between psuchos and stumos because the Gemara said you either need one or two. So we said if it's psuchos, you need to have two because it could have just fallen in. But if it's stumos, one would be enough. That's how Rashi looked. Itmar Afuna Amar Ad Shetahei Roish V'Shedra Nikr. Afuna said that in these fish, like the chilak, the small fish that could have tefer fish mixed in, if the roish and shedra of the fish is nicker because it wasn't minced or mixed or crushed, you're able to see a roish and a shedra. That would be a good enough of a siman that it's a kosher fish. And we said that the roish of a kosher fish is rounded rather than pointy, and a kosher fish has a shedra, a spinal cord or spine, which the treifa fish does not have. Rav Nachman Amar, oy roish, oy shedra. You don't have to see both. Either one alone is a siman that a fish is kosher. Master Rav Ukfu Bar Chama. The Raisa seems to say very conclusively, uvedogim kol sheyesh leisnaper v'kaskesas. As Rashi says, Mishnah he be'elu trevis. It's a Mishnah in Perak Elu trevis. Alma, what you see from here is ein siman l'dogim b'davar acher. The only siman is snaper v'kaskesas. So where does this other siman of either Roshai or Shedra, where does that come from? Rabaye Kitanya he by also Palmuda. There are certain types of fish, the Damu Reshayu Litmeim. There's a certain type of kosher fish that the head is pointy. It looks like a tummy fish. So as a secondary inspection, if you inspect the snapper, the kaskaskas, and the scales, it's an additional siman that you'd be able to tell that the fish is kosher. The whole machloikis as to whether or not you have to see the roish and the shedra, or the roish or the shedra, between Rav Nachman and Rav Huna, is to be toivel in the tzir of this fish. Avol bigufan, if you want to eat the actual fish, divra kol osur ad sheyehei roish v'shedra nicker. That the roish and the shedra have to be nicker in order to eat the actual fish. Rab Zara. Tosfos has an important point. Why would there be a difference between the guf and the tzir? Either way, is it kosher or not kosher? So Zok Tosfos v'im toimar v'tzir nami isur daraisa k'darminan hatmeim l'rabis tzir and v'reitfam. The tzir is also midaraisa. The same way the fish, if it's not kosher, is also midaraisa. Yeshloimar devadai daraisa tzir and also. That's for sure. The tzir is also midaraisa. Miut tziron bottle beroiv. The tzir would be bottle beroiv because we're talking about if you have a whole bunch of these small fish together, right, and you're not sure if each one is kosher. So if there was a tzir, we would say that it's some small amount of tzir from the tamei fish, it will be bottled in the much more tzir of the fish that are mostly kosher. But if it's actually eating the fish, the gufan, le bottle, the burial le betela. So that's why there's a good reason to make a distinction between eating the actual fish and just being toivel in the tzir of these fish. Okay, so Zok to Gemara weiter. I used to toivel in tzir of these animals even without checking. Even the Shemana lahada Amar Rav Yehuda b'shmei deula machlokas l'tavel b'tziran abel b'guvan divar kol oser. So therefore, actually, Rosh Vishet Liquor. So then, B'tzir Nami Loi Mitvilna. I stopped being toivel in the tzir. Why? Because I hold like Rav Huna. who says you need both. And therefore, I stopped being toivel with tzira unless there was both. Omra Papa Hilchasa Achi Hey Roish Vishedra Nicker Shel Kol Achas Vachas. Every single fish that you eat from this group of fish, every single one, you have to be able to independently check the Roish and the Shedra. Major effect Gemara. If there's pieces of chopped fish that have a siman on them, bein bekulan, bein b'miktsasan, even if there's only a siman about the kashrus of the fish on some of those pieces, but not all, you still can eat them all. Even if out of 100 pieces, only one of them had a siman of kashrus, you can eat all those small pieces. Kula mutaris. A guy brought like a barrel full of pieces of fish. One of those pieces had a simon. The hitter of Shimon ben Gamliel as a gerv kuloi, and Reb Shimon ben Gamliel was matter the whole gerv. What is the article touch the word gerv? Is it a barrel or a container? It's a barrel, and he was matter the whole thing. So how could it be? Each one has to be able to be checked for roish v'shedra. You were able to tell that those pieces fit together into one fish. So it was obvious that they all came from the same fish, and one of the parts had a siman, so that would indicate that all of these pieces are kosher. Either each fish maybe fit with others, or maybe it was a tuna, maybe it was a huge fish. My lememra. So what exactly was the great chiddush of this story? Yes, all the pieces fit together and they seem to look like they were from one fish, but maybe they're not. Kamash Mulon, you could rely on that. Who arba the tzachnosa the osi l'sichra? A boat full of a fish called tzachnosa showed up to a city called Sichra. Nova Grafuna Barchina. Now, tzachnosa is the type of fish that when they're young, they don't have any fins and scales. So you can't tell that they're kosher. But what Huna saw in the boat, scales all over the boat, even though he didn't see it on the fish, he was matir. So that's going to be the Gemara's kasha. In a moment, in a place where there could be other fish that have scales. It's on a boat that's a fishing boat. It's full of scales. Can you assume that every fish on that boat was going to be kosher? So you know what happened? Novak Shipure de Rava V'Aser. The Asar. Rava obviously expressed an opinion that it's not allowed. So they announced, Shipure is like a shofar. They announced a decree from Rava that these fish are osir. So the fish that came on the ship are osir. But Shipure de Rav Huna bar Chidna B'Shari. Rav Huna bar Chidna sent out that a big announcement that it's mutter. Politics. There's a big machlokes if the fish on this ship is mutter or osir. And then they used to ask him, you hold by the fish? You hold by the fish? Right? You carry with the fish? Amar B'Yirma B'Nifti L'Didi Amar Li Rav Papi. Rav Papi told me that even Rav Huna bar Chidna, who's Mekel, Kishara Rav Huna bar Chidna was only B'Tziron. Aval B'Gufan Loi Amar. I'm sorry, Aval B'Gufan Loi. Even Rav Huna bar Chidna never was matter to eat that fish. It was just matter to be toivel in the tzir of the fish. Loi Amar Rav Ashi. I'm sorry, Loi, comma. Amar Rav Ashi. L'Didi Amar Li Rav Papa. Rav Papa himself told me. So Rav Ashi is saying testimony. Rav Papa told me himself that Kishor Rav Huna bar Chidna is afilu bigufan. Rav Papa said, I heard it directly from Rav Huna bar Chidna, and he actually was matter even to eat the fish, just because there's scales in the boat. So how could I come out publicly and ask this fish to be eaten? Rav Papa said black and white, this fish is mutter. So I'm not going to contradict him. But on the other hand, I don't feel comfortable being matter this fish and relying on Rav Papa. Amar Rav Yehuda Mishmei Deula Machlokes L'Tavel B'Tzirin Aval B'Gufan Divra Kolat Sheyei Roish V'Shedra Niker Shel Kol Echad V'Echad. So because of that, I have to refrain from paskening anything because I am sort of in between two titans, and I'm not going to answer anything. Okay, Gavalta. Because this is Rav Ashi speaking, he didn't want to answer anything. So the question would be, Vivalta fish are in a boat that's full of scales, can you assume that these fish would have had scales? Yosy Rav Chinina bar Idi Kamed Rav Ada bar Abba. The Yosy v'Kamar. Ovid Kachav Mishahevi Areva Malei Chavios. A guy brought a box that was full of jugs that had in it tzir, but the nimtzas kilbis ba'achas mehem, and there was a kilbis in one of them. So we know if there's a kilbis floating around in it, it's a sign that the tzir is kosher or from a kosher fish. So would the fact that it's in one of these jugs be an indication that all of these jugs contain kosher tzir? Zok to Gemara, tzuchos, if those jugs are open, kulon mutaros, they're all going to be mutar. Sasumos, if they're closed up jugs, then he muteres, it's mutar v'chulon asuros. And Rashi says the reason for it is that if they're psuchos, we will say kulon muturos techihechi dehave b'hach havanave b'chulu. The same way we found this little fishy going around in one of the jugs, they probably all had it, but since they were left open, Alma, they got away. So you need to have two. Oh, so Freg Duvi, if it's psuchos, we learned earlier, you need to have at least two, and one wouldn't be enough. Zokt Toisvis, Nimtzis Kilbis, Zokt Toisvis Pirish, Hechshur Kilbis, Hainu Shtayim, Psuchos, Lepirish Rashi de El, Lefir Ephraim, Shtayim Estumas. So you're right. Toisvis says you're going to have to learn that it was Shtayim and not one. Excellent point. Zokt Gemara, Amalei Minolacha. How do you know that if it's psuchos kul mutaris? So he says mitlosa karoi, from three titans. Rashi teaches the word karoi as a titan karoi migimel chachomim gedolim, huge chachomim shehem kedai lismay chaleim ka'ala mikra. You could be saying on them like on a posuk. Who is that? Shmuel Mirav with Shmuel verbatim. These three titans all said that you could rely on being matter all the jugs. Amrav Runa Amrav Kirve Dogim, the kishkis, the innards of a fish. That's something that they used to eat in those days. Ubran and what's it called? What are fish eggs called? There's a word for it. Caviar. Caviar. Ein nikhin elamin amumcha. You could only buy it from a mumcha who could clearly identify that they came from a kosher fish. Because when you were looking at the caviar, it's not apparent what fish they came out of. Rami le Ula le Rabbi Dustoy, the Minbiri. Ula asked the following kasha to Rabbi Dustoy of Biri, which is the name of a city, Rashi says, Mitika Marav, Kirve Dogam, the and caviar, their eggs, Ein Nikhin Ela Min Amumcha. It's mashma Michlal, the Daktame, Islay Ubran. It must be that a tummy fish also creates caviar. And that's why you need a mumcha to determine did this caviar come from a kosher fish or from a non-kosher fish. But the problem is non-kosher fish don't produce eggs. They don't produce caviar in the first place. They just give birth directly to animals. Or when you dog tummy mashrits. The Rashi says the definition of mashrits means they just have many, many babies that are directly born from them. Rashi says, "Mashrish dag atzma b'meimai." So it's not an egg. The fish itself grows, similar to a mammal. Daktor matal beit, but a daktor is the one who lays eggs. Zaktuma, you're right. Sami mikan upra. You need a mumche to know if kirvei dogim came from a kosher fish or not a kosher fish. But you don't need a mumche about caviar. Caviar surely came from a kosher fish. Don't write off the brisa so quickly. Tarvayu matila beitamin. Even non-kosher fish lay eggs. Elazeh mashrish mibachutz. The kosher fish lays eggs out of its body, and the non-kosher fish is vizeh mashrish mibatim. The non-kosher fish has also eggs, many eggs, but they stay within the body of the non-kosher fish.
Caviar is just from one particular fish. It's
Uh-huh.
sturgeon, and
Uh-huh.
the
And
fish
sturgeon
eggs
is
is
non-kosher. Sturgeon is non-kosher, as a matter of fact.
is it? Is it non-kosher?
I think so. I don't think a sturgeon is kosher. I'm not sure. So
The
then,
the fish eggs are called roe, ROE.
oh, regular fish eggs.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So that's very interesting because if we have an example of a non-kosher fish that has eggs, so this Gemara is going to be hard to understand exactly what it means. Eggs inside, eggs outside. You need someone who knows all about fish and how they and
Well,
how
how
they.
can it be outside? Outside, it's fertilized. It
Well, the fish
dispels its
lays eggs.
eggs.
The question: do the eggs mature in the body or do they mature out of
Uh,
the body?
oh, do they mature? They're fertilized. I thought all fish eggs are fertilized outside of the body.
So it seems to say over here that that fish that are tummy non-kosher fish, the eggs remain in the body; they don't get laid.
Hmm. Okay.
Does the article explain how this works? Maybe they open inside, the shell dissolve. I don't know. I'm not sure how it works. The difference is if the eggs remain in the body of the mother while they're while they're maturing, versus if they're out of the mother. Because Gemara, Lamali mumcha. Why do you need a mumcha then? Why do you need a mumcha? Again, you have a very easy simon. You have a very easy simon. You know if it's mashrush b'chutz, we know which minim do this and which minim do that. The Dr. Rashi. I'm sorry. Dr. Gemara. So why do we need a mumcha? Livdik b'simonim. We have simonim. What are the simonim? The simonim are those that we're about to share. In other words, there's an additional piece of information that you can easily figure out if these fish are kosher or not, and you don't need a mumcha. The Tanya we learned, kisimani beitzim, the same way you can tell if the egg of a bird is kosher or not, kach simani dogim, that's how you can tell if a fish is kosher. Frankly, that makes no sense at all. Simani dogim, salkadaitach, the siman of a fish being kosher has to do with an egg of a bird? That doesn't even line up. Simani dogim is snapper v'kaskesas ksivuhu. So what are you trying to tell me that the siman of the kosher fish has to do with an egg? Ella kisimani beitzim kach simani over dogim. This the same way you can tell if a bird egg is kosher. That's how you can tell if the fish egg is kosher. What does that mean? The Elohim simani beitzim. How can you tell if an egg of a bird is the egg of a kosher bird or a non-kosher bird? Number one, Rashi's kodesh, I believe, as Rashi explains it, is our eggs, our chicken eggs. It's rounded all around, but the bottom of it is a broader round, and the top of it almost like a pointy round, right? So kodesh means that it has that feature where one side is just plain round, more of a wider base, and the other side is more pointy. The agogolos, the agogolos is also round. Roisha echad kad, one is more wider, roisha echad chad, and one is more pointy. So those types of eggs are tahira. But if both edges of the egg are more pointed, they're both rounded, so you don't have a difference between one end of the egg and the other end of the egg, then Tamea. So that's one simon. I just want to see Rashi because I don't have clear what these are. Shekaidris, Rashi says, is Meshucha. It's stretched. Shirachva b'roisha echad v'lechas u'mekateres v'nemsheches. One end it's wider and it gets narrower. Okay, and Vagalgoyos is Agula. It's round mitzideh on its side u'megalgelos. So since it's round, it will roll. The Eitzidah Rechavim doesn't have wide sides, meaning like flat sides. It's actually it could roll. Eggs roll, and one is wider and one is pointier. That's one sign of a kosher egg. And the other sign is chelmoin mi bechutz. The yolk is on the outside. The chelboin mi befnim, and the white is on the outside, and the white is on the inside. That's tamea. But our eggs, when you open up an egg, it's the yolk that's sitting inside a solution of the white, right? If the white is on the outside, the yolk's on the inside, tar, that's a simon of tahira. If they're all mixed together, zui betis hasheretz. So these are all litmus tests to determine if an egg is kosher. So why do I need a mumcha? Because what did we say earlier? Rav Bruna said, what do you mean? I just look at the egg, see what it looks like, and I'll know if it's from a kosher fish or not. The whole shaila is only relevant if the eggs were scrambled already. If they were scrambled, then you need to know what type of fish it came from, and there you're going to need the opinion of an expert. It has to be speaking where it was the mucha. Now there's a whole shaila if simanim are deraisa, could you rely on the simanim or not? So if you hold simanim lav deraisa, Tosha asks why couldn't the Gemara say simanim lav deraisa? So even though you have those simanim on the egg, but it's not proof enough. So it must be, since the Rabbi has said it must be that these eggs are not. It's not enough of a siman. It has to be where the person selling it to you says, first of all, I know it came from a kosher fish. That's number one. I saw the original fish, but here's the eggs. So the eggs are good to support the seller's claim that they came from a kosher fish. Remember, the story said, Ubran, take away because goyish fish don't have it. How could he say that goyish fish don't have it? And because of that, we delete that. From the Brisa, we have a little bit of a problem. Well, Tanya, we learned, Kisimani Beitzim, Kach Simone Ubre Dogim. The Brisa says clearly how you can tell. So if that's the case, how could he have said that you don't need any simonim for Ubre Dogim? They don't Dogim Tmeim don't even have eggs. You see from the Brisa that there are simonim, which means there must be eggs. Zoktimar, I don't understand. How could you ask me a kasha from a Brisa that you already admit needed to be adjusted? Right? Didn't we say right at the beginning the Lashon Brisa was like the Simonim of Beitzim, so too the Simonim of the fish. The Gemara said it can't be that. So the Gemara had to amend the Brisa and say, like the Simonim of eggs, that's the Simonim of fish eggs. So once you're telling me that this Brisa is not completely accurate, so everything's fair game. I'll say that it's not Simone Dogim, it's Simone Kirve Dogim. Meaning, if you want to know if the kishkis of a fish are kosher, compare them to the egg of a bird. What in the world do kishkis of a fish have to do with eggs of a bird? Where do you have the simonim that it's round, it's pointy in a kishke? Mishkachas lo b'shelfucha. Now shelfucha, I think from Rashi it means it's where it breathes, so it must be the gills. What is the bladder? So the bladder has that type of shape, the shape of a kosher egg. So when you check the bladder of a fish, if it has rounded on one end and more pointy on the other end, that will be an indication that it's a kosher fish. Oh, it's not the bladder, it's an air bladder that it uses to adjust its height in the water. So that's how you can tell. That's how you can tell what it is. Okay, so what if you don't have a mumcha? So what are you gonna do? You're stuck. You can't use these fish. So Rashi says, you don't have your simon because we're talking about a fish that got ground. And now the question is, could you eat this fish or not? Are you allowed to buy it? If the person selling them says, I saw these fish when they were whole, I then salted them and now they became a mush, but I could tell you that the fish that I bought were kosher. It's obviously a yid you're buying it from. Mutarin, that you'll be able to buy it. But for Nachman number, you need more. Unless you can actually point out the fish. These are the fish and these are the kirvaim of where they came from. Because he's not a mumcha. He's not an expert to understand fish. So he can't look at it and be sure. It's because we're saying that he was able to identify where it came from. Rabbi Yehuda Paskin for a Yid by the name of Adadaila, and Daila was a shamish who was like a shtickle caterer, so he always dealt with preparation of food, so he knew these things. The moment, sorry, the moment the fellow says, "I salted them," even though I can't show you the original fish, like Dovi says, he himself could testify that these kirvayim came from a kosher fish. You could therefore assume that it's kosher. This childus was a sharp plant. If it's cut, we say that it fully has absorbed the isser from a knife of a guy who had harvest in the knife. But if you just tear a leaf off, that's no problem because it wasn't cut with anything. Why do I need a Mishnah to tell me that if I have a piece of vegetable, no matter how sharp it is, that wasn't cut with any type of knife, that it should be kosher? So the small seeds in it. Rashi says, sai seeds that are in the bowl underneath these leaves, that fell off these leaves. Sai seeds that are actually on the leaves themselves, that might have been placed there, that came from a different vegetable, something else that's not kosher. Why would another vegetable not be kosher? Because that other vegetable might have been cut with a treif knife. You'll say that they probably fell, all these little seeds that we see probably fell from this leaf itself into the bowl that was holding these leaves, and therefore we can assume that they're all kosher. This is partially dissolved olives. They're already a mush because they're getting ready to be pressed. Does anybody know what the stuff is called? Like when you mix the wheat and the water to ferment to create bronfen, you know what that mush is called? It's called mulch. So Rashi says that's what we're talking about, mulch. It's in the state of dissolving. And now it's, you don't see it, each individual olive, it looks like a mulch. So just because you have mulch of olives in the container, why would I think that it's also? The roughly tuva, even though they're very dissolved already, you have to be choshid. Maybe a guy poured some wine into this olive solution. Kamash malon hani machmas mishchahu the rough. The reason why they're so dissolved is because of the oil themselves. It's not because you poured additional liquid of wine into it. Rabbi Yosy Omer shlachin asurin. Shlachin are the shlachin of olives. What does shlachin mean? Hechidam shlachin. It means olives that are very, very soft. If it's so mushy that if you took the fruit, the seed will literally, the pit would literally fall out of it. That's very much dissolved. You want to think that there could be mixed wine into it. Kamash along that they did. Hachagovin haboin. So we said when you buy grasshoppers, if they're on the display case in the store, you're not allowed to buy it. We have to be chosher. There's some non-kosher bugs mixed into it. But if it's out of their storage barrel, then you can be sure that there's no other species mixed in. Tanuraban hachagovim vakafrisin are kaflutois mivushalim v'chuvushim b'mechpesh. They're preserved kafrisin. It's a type of fruit. We learned it a couple of days ago. I don't remember what type of fruit it is. Vakaplutois, which are also a different type of fruit. But Rashi says again, they're soaked, and there's no problem of bishul gechavim because they could be eaten raw, and we're not worried about any tarfus in the keli of the goy because any tam that goes into it would be noishin tam of gam. So abom in the oitzer, if they come from an oitzer, from a storage area, umin a heftik, umin a svina, these are all storage boxes on a ship. Rashi's Makam Kinusan Shenatsurim Sham Zalza. It's a place where they're stored in mass. On the ship where they're shipped, so they're also stored in mass. Those are all mutarid because we know for sure nothing wrong got mixed into it. But a nimkrin b'katluza. But if they're on the display case in the shuk, l'fnechevani asurin Because I guess to make the product look good, he might spray wine on it to give it a nice shine, but in the oicher he doesn't do it. Now here's an interesting one. Apple cider of a goy. Are you allowed to drink apple cider of a goy? If they come from the storage area, from the barrel, it's mutter. But to buy an open jug of apple juice from the goy in the shuk, it must be that apple juice in those days was more expensive than wine. Yeah, so they lit it with wine. Pam achas chosh Rebbe b'meyav. What would you ever drink apple cider if you had a stomachache? Does it help? So here's look at this. Pam achas chosh Rebbe b'meyav. Rebbe had a stomach issue. Omar klum yesh adam sheyadeh yeit hapuchim shel oivit kechavim asur mutter. Does anybody know? Am I allowed to buy apple cider from the goyish shuk? Omar lefon of Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy. Let me tell you, Rebbe. Pam achas chosh abo b'meyav. My father Rabbi Yosy also had an issue with the stomach. Shal Ayin Shana was aged 70 years. Vishas he drank from it, and he got better. So his Rebbe told him. Rebbe said, "I don't understand. You knew this information and you never shared it with me. You had to wait until I had a direct need and I had to reach out to ask. If you knew that you could buy apple cider of a goy, why didn't you tell me? You had this solid, good information, and you didn't tell me about the mitzareni, and you caused me tsar because you didn't tell me right away." Batku umatu oivid kechavim echad shahayelo shalosh shmei garbi yein shal talpuchin shal ayin shana. They found the guy with a whole stock, a whole stash of this aged apple cider. Vishasa and Rebbe drank from it, v'nisrape, and he got better. Amar, he said, Baruch hamakim shemosar ilamei l'shem. Gebenched is the Rebbeinu Shloim, who gave his world to Shomer, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that this guy should be a Shomer on the apple cider for him for 70 years because he was going to need it later. Zok Teil Gemar Vayter. My v'chein l'truma. The Mishnah says also truma. What about v'chein l'truma? My v'chein l'truma. Amar B'Sheishes v'chein l'koyin hachoshed limkar truma l'shem chulon. The same thing would apply. Let's say you had a koyin. Now a koyin owns truma. Truma, if you sell it, it's worth a lot less than chulin because you have to eat a bit tahira, it has to be tar, not everybody can eat it, so its value is lower. So how about a kohen who we're choshim that he'll go to the marketplace and he'll sell truma, but he'll tell everybody that it's chulin, so he'll get more money. So a kohen who's choshim to sell truma and identified as chulin, only lefanav udaser, only the little amount that he has on display in his store, that's usher because we're afraid it's truma. But if he's selling it to you directly from his warehouse, then mutter. It will be mutter. You know why? Here's two mirses. He's afraid to mix chulun in. I'm afraid the Rabbanim will hear what I'm doing. And they'll cancel me that the whole thing is usher. So if they just cancel me on the little stuff that I have on my shelf, but if they cancel my whole warehouse, I'm in big trouble. So Fragan the Rishonim, I don't understand. If he's selling there in the market, they might also cancel his whole warehouse. What?
The loss is worth the risk.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they cancel him on his whole warehouse, even if they caught him just selling in the store? So they say, the Rishonim explain that their Rabbanim only cancel the product that you have there illegally. So they're not going to cancel other stash that you have. So you're right. So the risk is worth it because the loss isn't so bad. He has a stop loss on it. Baruch Hashem, we were able to finish the second paragraph of Zara, and Beli Neder Hadin Lach Ein Mamidim, Beli Neder Hadin Lach Ein Mamidim, Beli Neder Hadin Lach Ein Mamidim. Zok Elek Mishnah. Kol Akslama Masurim. All getchkes are usher. You know why? Even though they're not always worship. According to the mayor, any getchke they'll always pull off the shelf to serve at least once a year, which is not really pshat. The Gemara is going to get into the pshat, but since it's used once a year, it's called a getchke. It's also mana. If the getchke if they put into the hand of the getchke either a bird or a stick or a kader, that shows that the getchke has chashivas. Even not all getchkes were created equal. Some getchkes are more choshev. So the getchkes that have something in their hand, those are the choshev ones. So he said, look, he has a stick in his hand. That's right. If the getchke was made out of mud, it's literally a stick in the mud. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Av kol sheyesh biyado, he called over. Any getchke that has something in his hand, it's a rye that they're serving. Frank Gemara, I don't understand. Eden Avdin Pamachas B'Shona. If everybody could agree that even a getchke without anything in his hand will be served at least once a year, so then it should be Asher Ba'no, my time of the Rabbanon. How could the Rabbanon be makel and say only that it's a makel? Because I guess that means it's served more regularly. That's not what it means. In Reb Meir's place where he lived, they served these getchkes once a year. So therefore, you can assume all of these getchkes are also. And Reb Meir, the Chayish Lamiyuta, Gozer Shar Mekoimis Atu Oisamakat. In the place where Reb Meir lived, it was the norm for all getchkes to be served at least once a year. So therefore, all other places where it might not have been the derech to serve getchkes once a year at least, he's Gozer Atu the Miyuta, because Reb Meir is always Choshesh Lamiyuta. There's a miyut of cities that the goyim have this minhag to serve the getchkes at least once a year, and Reb Meir is Chayish Lamiyuta. The Rabbanon, the Loi Chayish Lamiyuta, the Rabbanon also agreed that in Reb Meir's city they had it. But I don't have to gozer all of the getchkes in every other city because of that. Rabbanon Loi Chayish Lamiyuta, Loi Gazu Shar Mekayim is Atu Oisim. Amar B'Dam Shmuel, Be'andrati Shel Malachim Shoninu. You know what we're talking about? Now this is Rashi and Tosfos, but Rashi learns Andrati means as follows. Kishamelech meis, when a king would die, Oisin Surosai B'Pesach Hashar Luzikar. They would actually create a little bust of him at the entrance to the gate, so people should remember the king. The Hasam Ka'asar Reb Meir, that's the Reb Meir is answering the Andruta, which the Rabbanan held you don't have to answer. The Agav Chavivusa Palchile. He wasn't in the Avoda Zara, but since they love the king, they're going to bow down to it, and that's going to make it Asr Ba'ano. It's also speaking about the bust of the king that was placed at the opening of the city, because that was a makom choshev. That's where you have to be choshed that there's a possibility that someone was oivid, that it became an Avoda Zara. Tosfos actually says a little differently. Look at Tosfos, Andrati Shamalachim, Pirsha Kondrus, Tura Smelach Hameis, Oisul Zikaron. Fakert, it's a dead king. But for Vetam Pirsha, it's Tura Smelach Chai, Oisul Nechvoidai. The statue that we're talking about is a statue of a king that's living to show respect to the living king. For Rai Ladovar, Me Andrati Shal Nebuchadnezzar. So I'm not sure what the Rai is. The Oid Omer B'Medrash, Adrianus Kaiser, Holach as Rabbi Yeshua, Latayal B'Medina, Harei Utzura Slomim, Sheyoisan Lechvoidai. And the Iranians showed Rabbi Yeshua, look at these getchkes of me that they made. Okay. And so now what about Andrati Shamalachim Sheninu? The Tosfos, Pirsha Kondrus Uvahu, Ka'asar Reb Meir, the Agav Chavivu Usayu, Polchiluhu. But Avoshar Tzlomim Loi Asar Reb Meir. So Tosfos says a kash, and he says it's exactly the opposite. The Andrati ain't Stam and Evad. But others look them the Hakakai Hatera, the Rabbanon that are matir, Rashi learns that Reb Meir who answers is speaking by the Andrati of a king. But the Rebbe Tam learns the Gemara saying no, the getchkes that the Chachamim are matir are the Andrati of a king. The Bahanu Shari Rabbanon. The Afka knows the Rabbanim were matter, the Vadid Lenoavadu, they made for honor and not for Avoda Zara. Everything else, the Rabbanim will be made to a mayor, that it's also. Okay, we'll stop here, Bez Hashem, and we'll be on tomorrow.